Yeah, I would say that don't be afraid to question and doubt uh, anything in your religious system that you feel like there's something wrong here, right? And sometimes you have something wrong, and I call that emotional dissonance, where you feel in your heart there's something wrong. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something wrong. Don't ignore that. Pursue it, question it. And then the other side of it is what's called cognitive dissonance, which is more of a logical thing. Things are logically contradictory.
Today, I'd like to welcome a very special guest, Michael Camp, to the show. Welcome, Michael. It is such an honor and a pleasure to have you here today.
Thanks, Christina. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, me too. And it took us a while to get here.
Yeah.
We had a couple struggles, but we are here. So I've been excited to have this conversation. And there's so much that I have been curious about while watching you on other podcasts and on your
Mhm.
own channel. So let's just get started with let's start with your journey through your deconstruction and how your book was born. And anything you want to share around that.
Sure. Yeah. Actually, this is my third book, but yeah, deconstruction, it was a long process for me. I was in the evangelical movement for 25 years or more. And as I like to say, I went down to the evangelical swimming pool and chose the highest diving board, climbed it, and then dove in. And uh, so that meaning that I became a missionary to Muslims in Africa, and I was a very sincere believer. Um, I felt like that I had discovered the ultimate reality. Uh, I had some personal problems, and the church seemed to help me solve those problems. And there was a community there that was welcoming, and they seemed to have all the answers to all the life's mysteries. And they had this Bible, of course, that they thought was authoritative and had all the answers. And who was I to question the Bible? I had a positive spiritual experience, so I just kind of dove in, and then slowly over many years, I began to deconstruct certain doctrines and dogmas that evangelical church or movement teaches. And probably the first one was the doctrine of hell. And when I got on the mission field and basically fell in love with uh, African Muslims that I was working with and that I lived close by and developed relationships with. And I realized, wait a minute, there's something wrong with this doctrine. These people that I love, that I felt like God's love was there. It wasn't just me, liking people. I felt very, very strong. It was a spiritual thing too. And then the doctrine was telling me, oh, these people are going to go to hell, eternal punishment, unless they convert to Christ or become Christians. And so that was like my first big red flag when I deconstructed. But, in the evangelical movement, um, you don't, there's certain things that you don't want to bring up or question too much, or you'll get a lot of pushback. So I kept this silent, this concern that I had, and I came up with something on my own. It wasn't what I would call universalism, but it was more inclusive for people outside of Christianity, as far as the heaven and hell paradigm. So that was kind of like the first step. Then over the years, there was a lot of other things, and then finally, uh, after coming back from the mission field and being clinically depressed and really having to, because of spiritual abuse, basically, I really started to question things in more depth and get into a whole bunch of other series of beliefs and practices that we had in the evangelical church. And I discovered that, if you look at history, the history of Christianity and the history of the church, etc., you'll find that a lot of these doctrines that people believe are just not historically accurate. And they're not, there's Bible translations that are mistranslated, there are misinterpretations, there's things that came from, you know, the Reformation that didn't start in the beginning. There's things that came from the 4th century when the Romans took over Christianity and Romanized it. And a lot of these things are just, I call them myths in the book. I go through 12 different myths that most modern Christians believe, particularly fundamentalists and evangelicals.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for explaining and painting that picture. There's a couple of things that stood out to me while you were sharing. And the first was how the doctrine of hell did not resonate with you
Right.
completely. And I also heard you say spiritual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
I know that's a huge topic. So I'd love it if you could dissect like what actually is spiritual abuse. And you mentioned that it caused you to be clinically depressed. Like, what are some of the effects that people can experience from spiritual abuse?
Right. Well, I would say the first thing to keep in mind is that because of a lot of these doctrines that I'm describing, like the doctrine of hell and other ones that make God out to be, like for another one would be believing in the inerrancy of the Bible, so that everything you read in the Bible is, they say, is 100% true and exactly represents what God is like. If you believe just those two things, then what you end up doing is having a fear-based faith, because if you don't measure up, well, you're going to hell, or your friends are going to hell, or there's always this threat of retribution, right? Punishment. And then if you believe everything in the Bible, well, there's some pretty ugly things in the Bible, and God told the Israelites and Joshua to go kill every non-combatant women, children, infants, and the unborn in the Canaanite conquest. So you have a lot of this what I call the two-faced God, or a God that is very retributive, and so that is in the back of your mind, right? People preach the love of Jesus, but in the back of your mind is, yes, but there's a big yes, but, right? And that fear, that just drives you into a fear-based faith, right? And that can be spiritually abusive in itself, because you hear sermons, or people make statements, you read something in the Bible, and a lot of these things are mistranslated. Like the terms for hell and eternal punishment are actually mistranslated in most English Bibles. So you read things like that, and it can produce in you a fear. And so your supposed relationship with God is kind of like fear-based, because there's not really true unconditional love, because if you don't measure up, if you don't jump through the right religious hoops, then there's always that threat of punishment or hell or rejection, being called a heretic, and all kinds of other things. But the other thing about spiritual abuse is, you were asking how it, how would you describe it? And I think because people believe in a sort of very legalistic, narrow way of looking at the Bible, they come to the conclusion that everyone should be obeying what they read in the Bible the exact same way, right? And so there comes a set of beliefs. You can't have, from, I don't know, sexuality. You can't be gay, right? or lesbian. You can't be, a trans. You can't have sex before marriage. You can't have, you have to believe the Bible is true. Everything. You can't doubt anything. You have to believe the way we think about the cross, for example, that Jesus took the punishment that we deserve, that we're actually very depraved people, and God really can't live with us because we're sinful. So Jesus had to come and get tortured and murdered on this cross and then God would consider forgiving you, but he really wouldn't forgive you unless you agreed with all this narrative, right? And so all these things combined, really drive people to people of authority in the church to say, okay, you have to believe this set of beliefs and act this certain way, or else, we might put you. One example would be churches that try to implement church discipline on people, right? They get this out of a passage in the New Testament, but they totally exaggerate what's going on, and all of a sudden, the pastor or some of the leaders in the church are trying to tell you, oh, don't do this, don't read that book, don't don't even be pure. The purity culture was a big one, for young teens and people in their 20s. Make sure you're pure, or else, right? And then it's very controlling, and so people feel like they're under control, and they have a fear of getting out of line. They can't question too much, or they're being called to account. And so all these kinds of things added up can amount to a spiritual abusive relationship. And it's very detrimental, because it doesn't allow people to be themselves and just make up their own mind about things. You always have to fit into a very small a box, right? And you can't be yourself.
Yeah. Wow. Like what you just talked about brought so much up for me. So in my journey, I was raised Catholic, and I've been interested in hearing people's deconstruction stories. And the difference that I noticed is that I grew up Catholic, and I kind of rejected all of it as a very young child, even though I absorbed a lot of everything that you just said.
Yeah.
But I was not devoted. So I don't
Right.
actually call my journey deconstruction as so much as I call it healing.
Yes.
But
Right. Yeah. I
what
get
you
it.
just said, so for me, when I was raised, I was so afraid to make a mistake.
Yes.
So afraid
Right.
to make a mistake because I believed that I was going to be condemned and go to hell. And I was taught to pray to Jesus, as he was this perfect model of what I could never attain. And at the
Right.
young age of 5, being as sensitive as I am, I created an eating disorder.
Okay.
And so, like, this spiritual abuse and this topic of religious trauma, it's just very, very alive. And so I love that we're talking about this, because I think that there's so many people, whether they grew up religious or not, because they've been here in the United States with such a heavy Christian influence. I think we all have these ideas and beliefs. I'm curious about your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, like what you're saying is, it sounded like you had, because of the dogma of the church, that's kind of like indirectly spiritually abusing you, right? People weren't coming after you necessarily, but they taught you certain things that make you frightened, that make you paranoid
Yeah.
about the way the world is and the way God is, and how you're going to live your life. And so, yeah, you could develop an eating disorder, something else. It can come out in different forms, right?
Mhm.
So, and then the other part of spiritual abuse is when people actually proactively go after you, right, in some way. Like, for example, I know someone who um, they were in a men's group, and the men's group was doing this thing about confess your sins to one another, and this person did not think they had any pressing sins that they needed to confess, and they weren't that their personality wasn't really sharing all these deep things. But because he didn't do that, they get on his case. You're not confessing your sins, what's wrong with you, you're not humble. And then they started basically trying to force him to confess something, and he was pushing back and going, "Why are you treating me this way?" Right? And they would go so far in this particular church. They went so far as to, like, this one other family decided, this one guy decided, hey, I'm really busy with work in the summers, because he was a farmer or something. I'm not gonna go to church for a couple of months, because I'm just gonna focus on my work. And they would write letters to him saying, wait a minute, you don't have that option. This is not a this Going to church is like a marriage. You don't just drop out for 2 months. And so they kind of berated him. And what you do is, if you're really afraid, you go back and you say, okay, I'll do it, right? And if you're not, if you're like, this is ridiculous, then you end up deconstructing or leaving and trying to find a better church or something. Or they kick you out, right, for not doing the right things. So but either way, indirectly or directly, it can be very destructive for people. And it's very sad, because it's like the opposite of what Jesus taught, as far as love your neighbor and build each other up. So it's not like this happens every day, but like you probably experienced, that fear can be very subtle, right? It's not something that, it's like, oh, okay. It just kind of wears on you over time, right? And that's the bad part of it. It just kind of sticks with you, and you have to kind of confront it when you deconstruct, or it can stay with you for many years.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's subtle and it can stay with you. So I am a recovered addict. I had an eating disorder and an addiction to drugs and alcohol. I'll have 10 years sober in December.
Oh, congratulations. Good for you.
Thank you.
Right.
And the first thing that I learned when I walked into the rooms of AA to, finally start my journey into sobriety for real in December of 2013, I learned that one of the reasons that I grabbed for substances, or that I used, was because I was filled with 100 forms of fear.
Oh,
And
wow.
as I went through the program, we do the steps. And the first step is we admitted we were powerless. And then the second step is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Mm-hmm.
And what I saw when I was doing steps 2 and 3, which is made a decision to turn our life over to the care of God as we understood him, was that I actually got to create what I thought, or what I felt like God or a higher power was to me. And the exercise I went through was, my sponsor told me to write out everything you want in a best friend. And I had no idea what we were doing. So I wrote down every characteristic of a best friend. And when I read it to her, she said, "There's your higher power." And I was shocked.
That's a really good way of handling that. Excellent.
Yes. And I was shocked, because I was like, wait, what? Like, I'm not going to be punished by my higher power?
Yeah.
Because that
Right.
was
Yeah. Right.
the belief that I didn't know I had, that was
Right.
running my whole life. All of my choices were coming out of that belief.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's remarkable, because what you did was you put down what you felt in your heart would be a good friend,
Mhm.
right? And then your religious indoctrination basically was saying, well, that can't be the way God is, because the church teaches this, or I read in the Bible this, or all this other stuff. And people can't bring themselves to come out of that system, to look at it from just, oh, in your heart, or just what you maybe a logical way of, like, thinking, like, gee, if God is love, then what would he be like? Would he really send me to hell? Or if
Right.
God is love, would the church really act like this if they
Right.
were following a God of love, and stuff like that. So I love that exercise that you were told to do. That really is very profound.
Yeah, it was so profound. And it's actually what got me to see that. the entire time I was growing up, I did not resonate, and I didn't know I didn't resonate because I just turned to addiction from the earliest age I could, and so it really helped me open my mind and expand into there actually might be another way, and there might actually be a God that is loving to everyone and not just people who follow certain rules or do things a certain way.
Yeah, right,
So,
right.
yeah.
A universal love.
Mhm. Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I go through that in my book, and I talk about this latest book, Breaking Bad Faith. I talk about how there's such a retributive, uh, even violent view of God that we have in conservative Christian theology, and kind of unpack that and help give people permission. Hey, you can deconstruct this. And the reason is because uh even Jesus and the earliest followers of Jesus, they didn't view the Bible the way that conservative Christians view the Bible. Jesus was deconstructing some violent narratives in the Old Testament. He wasn't saying everything in there is true. He was actually saying the opposite. No, it's not true. You heard it said this, and I'm going to tell you this, right? And eye for eye, tooth for tooth. No, that's violent, reciprocal violence, retaliation. That's not the way God is. He's actually merciful, and he actually loves his enemies. And you can love your neighbor and love your enemies just like God does, right? And so he's introducing universal love. But no, if you're really stuck in the paradigm or the structure of religion, organized religion that's conservative in particular, then you can't get out of that until you deconstruct that, right? So yeah, that's amazing that you came to that, the way that you came to that conclusion. It's very beautiful.
Yeah. It was over a matter of years, and I, still have things that arise where I can look at and say, oh, wow, that's a belief that I adopted, and it actually is limiting myself, or it's not
Yeah.
serving me. And
Right.
what's come out of, so I went to treatment for the eating disorder 15 years ago, and I'll have 10 years in December sober. And where I am now is that Jesus is my hero. Jesus is
Hmm.
my hero. I talk to him all the time. I study A Course in Miracles and the Way of Mastery. And I actually did a podcast interview where we titled it Jesus is My Hero and I Am Not a Christian. And one of the reasons that I was really excited to talk to you is because when I look at TikTok, or I look at a lot of reels on Instagram and Facebook, there's a lot of people who've deconstructed that are currently atheist. And so I'm really curious if you could talk about what your beliefs are now as far as the truths of the universe, God, Jesus.
Right.
What are your beliefs on that currently?
Yeah, yeah. Let me share that. Now, did you say that Jesus was your hero, but you're not a Christian?
Yeah, Jesus is my hero, and I'm not a
But
Christian.
yeah, okay, yeah. I know exactly what you mean. Okay. And it makes perfect sense to me, but it doesn't make perfect sense to a lot of people.
Right.
But it really does make perfect sense. And the reason is because Christianity, the way we think of it, really didn't even start until at least 200 years after Jesus. So if Jesus is your hero, then you know you don't have to be a Christian, right? Because Christianity, the way what we've been told is Christianity is really uh not the true message of Jesus, right? There's a little bit of overlap, but most of it, the core is really not the same. So that makes perfect sense to me, right? So yeah, I mean, how do you handle, what do you do with Jesus if you deconstruct, conservative Christianity? It's a great question. And I and I, when I said I was laying out some things in the book, in the first half of the book, I lay out kind of the negative things, the myths. And it's like the same way that you identified harmful doctrines that weren't serving you, or they might be unhistorical or whatever. That's what we need to do. identify those things. And then really, I encourage people, instead of throwing out the baby with the bathwater, which is okay. If people become an atheist, I don't have any trouble with that because I usually have very good reasons to become an atheist. But I encourage people, um, is there anything that you love in the teachings of Jesus, or even the prophets, when he spoke of the prophets who stood up for social justice and etc.? Is there anything that you like about that? And think about how that contrasts with the retributive type of God, and distinguish that from what I call the restorative God, who actually does have universal love, and does lead us into a realm where we can live a life of love, in but without the religion, without the system, without the baggage that we're taught, right? And so that's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I consider myself a follower of the love ethic of Jesus. I don't like to call myself a Christian. If I'm with some people who are Christians, then I might say, yeah, I'm a progressive Christian. But if I'm with other people, I'd say, I don't want to use that word Christian because it's loaded. It's a loaded term. So, but that's the problem with labels we have. So, you have to kind of choose your words wisely and choose your labels wisely as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Jesus was a spiritual genius, and he had a lot of good things to say about the way God was really like, and what that love is the most important thing in the world. It's what matters most. It's what God cares about most. God is love. He's merciful by nature. You don't have to believe the whole Bible is true to believe that. You don't have to believe that Jesus was tortured on a cross to take your place to believe that. Actually, the Eastern Christians did not have that belief. Most Western Christians do, but the Eastern Christians did not, and still don't. There's a lot of things that you can throw out because that's a legitimate way to approach religion and the Bible. You don't have to feel like you have to accept everything. You can make up your own mind. And when you do that, I think what I say is that the bad and the ugly in the Bible sinks to the bottom, and the good and beautiful rises to the top. And if you do that, then it really jumps out at you. Wow, actually, universal love was really strong in the parts of the Gospels. Oh, wow. Universalism, the thought, the belief that all will be well in the end, and everyone will be restored in the end. I think that's what Jesus taught. Actually, the history tells us for hundreds of years, that's what most people in the church taught. It wasn't until Augustine that the doctrine of hell became popular, and he was living in the 4th and 5th century. So,
Yeah.
so anyways, you kind of got to get yourself out of that trap, and then you can see the beauty of it. And if people want to be, some people are just so traumatized, they just have to become an atheist. I think, I don't know. It's just like a pendulum swings way over to the side, and that's fine. I understand that, but I accept everyone, wherever they land, as long as they haven't become an axe murderer and they are rampaging around the world trying to harm everyone. And they're good people. They're trying to, and usually people coming out of religion, they recognize that love ethic is still good, and they try to at least put that in their philosophy of life somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how you said that, sometimes we swing the pendulum. Like, I've definitely been a pendulum swinger,
Yeah, right. It's
especially as
all
an addict, being all or
right.
nothing. But I do see a lot of content out there where it's almost like the same I'm really not sure of the word, but it's like that motivation, that need to have people believe what you believe. I can see that from some of the atheists as well. And
Yeah, that's the
while
yeah.
yeah, and that could be part of the journey.
It's
Some
sometimes part of the journey, but yeah, fundamentalism can rear its ugly head anywhere.
yeah,
You can take a progressive idea and you can make it fundamentalist,
yeah,
right? So there are fundamentalist atheists that really get upset because you believe in God. It's
yeah,
like, right? What? I have to convert you.
right.
I can't be your
Yeah,
friend. That kind of a thing. I
yes.
mean, to me, that's just immature. I mean, just get over it. People have different views about everything.
Yeah. And I loved how you mentioned the universal love and how love does accept all things and it heals all things and it transcends all things. And I have heard someone told me a while ago that if you put your little love goggles on and read the Bible with your love goggles on, you will see all the good and all the beautiful.
That's great. I got to get a pair of those love goggles.
I have some somewhere. I have hard glasses that I wear everywhere. But
That's
I
great. I
have,
love that.
yeah, and I haven't actually. I do have a Bible, and I started to read it, and I just was like, yeah, I'm not ready for that yet. But what I did notice is that through the workings, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but the workings of A Course in Miracles and the Way of Mastery, those
Yeah.
are scribed and believed to be, I believe them to be channeled works that
Mhm.
Jesus wrote through other people. And there's a lot of parallels. So I know in the Bible, just like it says in Way of Mastery, as well as Course in Miracles, it does say that Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you. And I
Yeah.
believe that's in the Bible as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's in Luke. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he said it different ways, but at one time he said the kingdom of God is within you. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Which is pretty much at the core of love, right? Like everything exists within inside of us. I'm curious if you would elaborate on what that means. The
Yeah. Well, I can you go back to Genesis and it says God made human beings in the image of God, right? And so if God is love, then he made us in the image of love. And we have, in within us, we have the ability to connect to God, to understand love, to respond to love. Um, and so, yeah, I think that just it matches. You can, I mean, because there are there are competing views in the Bible about the care that contradict one another, and you have to be able to say, okay, what is the view that really makes the most sense? What is the view that really creates the best world, right? And I think it's pretty easy to come to the conclusion that, well, the retributive God who killed all these people and drowned the planet in the time of Noah, that doesn't sound like the God that Jesus was talking about, right? If you, especially if you deconstruct some of the mistranslations in the New Testament, especially like hell and eternal punishment, etc., you'll find out that Jesus wasn't talking about that. He was talking about something else, but he was talking about something restorative that happens, right? So, like, you had a problem with drugs and alcohol. How do we save Christina? Do you have to accept the right doctrines and then God can finally say, okay, now I can forgive you? Or do you say, hey, let's put Christina in a loving environment, uh and let's not blame it all on Christina. This is a disease and this is a issue. Let's bring her through rehab and let's restore her in love. And that's what God does to anyone who's lost their way, I think.
yes. Wow, that was really powerful. Like let's put her in an environment of love. And love is acceptance of all things. And one of the things that really stood out to me is that they say in the big book, and I believe this through my own experience, that no human power could have relieved us from our alcoholism or place addiction or anything, right? No human power. And as I was never atheist, I just checked out, like, didn't think about a God. So I had no opinion either way. Like, there was just no thought of it.
Mm-hmm.
When I heard that no human power could have relieved us from our alcoholism, then it was like, okay, well, what power? What power is that? And in order to put my toes into any kind of spiritual belief or spiritual practice or any kind of community, I first reached for love.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's power. Love is a powerful thing. It's like, um, and yeah, I think love changes people, and there's a paradigm shift that goes on in your mind, in your heart, and that can eventually change you if you're in an environment of love. In my book, I have these stories about people. In the second half of the book, I talk about the path of peace and love, and how if you actually live that way, you can actually help people change from evil to good. So there are, I mean, in your case, you probably had a lot of things that were, you didn't just wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to become a irresponsible drug addict and alcoholic. You
Nope.
have all these things that were impacting your life that led you to there, right? And so it's really simple. It's much more simple to say, oh, Christina, we can forgive you because, I mean, I had the same issues. I mean, lots of people have those issues, right? It's just right. But then what do you do with a terrorist, or what do you do with this one particular person was a domestic terrorist. He came back from Iraq as a veteran, and he hated Muslims, and he wanted to plant a bomb in the local mosque where he lived because he was really angry that they had, while he was gone at war, they had come in and created a community and built a mosque in his hometown. So he wanted to kill them. And so what do you do with a person like that, right? How do you convert that person? And so the Muslim community where he was trying to do this, he went there one day and visited them to scope out the place. And the people there, they knew there's something wrong with this guy, but they just extended love and hospitality because that was part of their Muslim tradition or belief that God is love, and that's we're sent here on earth to love one another and to help each other in the struggles that we have. And so they reached out to him. A long story short, they befriended him, invited him over for dinner, showed him hospitality. He got to know them. And what do you think happened to this guy? I mean, what would you think? He was eventually, he
Yeah,
was loved. He
felt
was loved so much that he changed. So how do you think he changed? I'm just asking you a guess.
Yeah. Did he become Muslim?
Yes, he became Muslim and became a leader in the mosque. I
Wow.
mean, you just yeah, can you believe that? And then, yeah, so that's just one example. And then I'll share one more that's really cool too. This guy named Daryl Davis. If you Googled him, you'd find him, but he's a Black American musician, jazz musician, who'd go all over the country and perform. And one night he met a Ku Klux Klansman. And long story short, he ended up becoming friends with this Ku Klux Klansman, even though he was very suspicious, and the Klansman was very suspicious of him in the beginning, and even fearing their life at one point for their life. But he had this one question. why do you hate me when you don't even know me? Okay. So this guy is like, okay, why are these people so racist? And so through a long process, he would befriend them, love them, show them respect as human beings while challenging their view of Black people and saying, no, I think you're wrong about that, and here's why, and stuff like that, right? And what was the outcome of him doing this, building these bridges like that? What was the outcome? Over 200 Klansmen gave up their robes and renounced racism.
Yeah. Wow.
It's just incredible, right? So that's restorative love. That's universal love, right?
Mhm.
Now, I found that out through my own study. I don't know. I'm deep thinking. I'm a kind of an intellectual. Although I've had some powerful spiritual experiences that I could share with you, but that's kind of like where I'm coming from. But people like you might find it another way. You say you read the Course in Miracles. I'm only vaguely familiar with that, but I've heard some good things about it.
Mhm.
So, your experience with AA and Course in Miracles, you come to the same kind of conclusion, right? Other people have completely spiritual experiences, not intellectual, and they come to the same conclusion. So it's a beautiful thing, though.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing those stories. I know for me, I came to it in a couple of different ways. In treatment in 2008, I was loved. And when I left treatment, I was able to think of love as my religion. And
Yeah,
they
right.
told me to, get into as many recovery groups as I could and spiritual communities. And through that, I found this community that Greg Bear has a book called Real Love.
Hmm.
And there are communities that get together to create a container where you can share and be loved and be seen and be heard and be accepted. And so I had it, kind of from two things: the intellectual sense, where I started to read and study and, seek what is it that actually resonates for me. But I also had the visceral experience of being loved. When we walk into the rooms of AA, I know many people who have heard something along the lines of this is, we'll love you until you can love yourself.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And so,
That's yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
through
that's true.
community and connection, and also my own thirst, I believe that we're all seeking or searching for that love that inherently is who we are.
Yeah, that's definitely true. But you mentioned community. It's really important in deconstructing. So if people are deconstructing their faith, that you got to find a community. You got to find people who are thinking the same way, or else, you'll feel all alone. I mean, when I started, I thought I was the only one coming out of evangelicalism. And then this guy named Rob Bell wrote this book, Love Wins. And I'm like, he stole my thunder. I was going to say that. you know, and all these people that I started, they were probably always there, but I think there's a movement going on of deconstruction in the last 20 years, especially, but in intensifying in the last 10 years. That so there's people out there. You can find a community, right? You just have to look for it. I have a support group that people can join. They can find it on my website. Um, I have a deconstruction workshop. I have kind of things that people can plug into. And once you find that community, it makes a huge difference.
Yes. Yeah, we're not supposed to do this alone. We're supposed to be connected with
Oh,
each
yeah,
other,
absolutely.
for
Right.
sure. So
Yeah,
whether it's deconstruction or getting sober or anything really, there is a community out there for you. And community is the way to not be alone in it, for sure.
absolutely. Yep.
Well, this has been so much fun. I have a few questions that I ask all my guests.
Okay.
Before we go there, I'm curious if there's anything that you wanted to share today that you didn't get to share, or if there's anything that's coming alive for you to share with the audience and the listeners right now.
Yeah, I would say that don't be afraid to question and doubt anything in your religious system that you feel like there's something wrong here, right? And sometimes you have something wrong, and I call that emotional dissonance, where you feel in your heart there's something wrong. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something wrong. Don't ignore that. Pursue it, question it. And then the other side of it is what's called cognitive dissonance, which is more of a logical thing. Things are logically contradictory. And then when you're in a religious system, you're taught to ignore that and just shuffle it under the rug. Don't ignore that either. If there's something that doesn't make sense to you, pursue it, question it, find some answers that do resonate with you, because I think each of us has that capacity to recognize what's true in the world, and it has to do with whether it's loving and healthy or whether it's harmful and abusive, and we can all pretty much figure that out. It's not rocket science, right? And so just encourage people to question, doubt, don't let shuffle things under the rug, find a community, read my book. No, my shameless plug. There's lots of good books out there, not just mine, but just check it out. I have a website called spiritualbrewpub.com that you can find out more about me. And there's a path of peace for your mind and for your life. You just have to keep plugging away and you'll find it.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, question everything, even things you hear on this podcast. Like I tell my clients, question everything. If it doesn't feel right, question it. And so many people that I've heard that have gone through deconstruction and are living happy and fulfilled lives have dived in and read multitudes of books. And so
Yes, right. Yeah. Right.
Michael has books. There's others who have books.
Oh, yeah.
They're
Right.
everywhere. So
Yep.
yeah, and I will include links to your books as well as your website in the description of the show for anyone who might feel led to seek out Michael's work. So with all that
Great.
being said, I have 3 questions that I ask all
Okay.
my guests. The first question I'm pretty sure we've touched on in various different ways, but I love to ask it anyways. How would you define or describe God?
How would I describe God? I would describe God as the divine source, the ultimate wisdom of the universe. I like the verse that says God is love, but I think the opposite is true. Love is God. Love is what matters most. And if you tap into love, you're tapping into God. And I don't like to get into the theologies and doctrines, although they might be interesting. Is God a Trinity? And was Jesus born a virgin, or whatever else? I just like to boil it down to love is what matters most, and God is universal love.
Thank you for that. The second question is, what would you say is the purpose of life?
The purpose of life. Okay. You know what? People people kind of growing up in religion, you're kind of taught that, there's kind of this ultimate end times, last days, last judgment. We're gonna go to heaven, and that's all that counts. And so you got to get ready and you got to obey everything. And then love for one another just becomes like this, just one of the things on this long list that you have to do to get to heaven, or to reach some goal of being okay finally. Well, to me, that's just so misguided. It's like the purpose of life is to become your true self and love other people, because I think we're all connected some mysterious way. I don't know how it works. But when I learned to love people, it's so rewarding, and it just builds so much, makes the world so much a better place. We just build so many good things when we learn how to love one another, even loving our enemies. So I think the purpose is just to try to pursue a path of universal love in your life.
Thank you. That was beautiful. I also feel like I just want to say that we have nothing to lose when we choose love, only joy. And we feel love ourselves when we're loving others. So
Yeah, right,
we'll
right.
never miss out.
No, it's true. And you can love people that are very different than you. And when I still have fundamentalist friends and family, and they're harder to love, but you can do it. Sometimes you have to draw boundaries. I'm not going there. You're not going to, no, I'm not going to go to your church. No, I'm not going to do this, whatever it is, but you can still love those people. And you'll find that actually helps for them, if they have a need to have a new paradigm, then that helps when they realize, oh, actually this terrible new age liberal Democrat wacko liberal is not so bad after all, right? Right.
Yes, thank you. The final question is, if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to a younger version of yourself, what would that one piece of wisdom be?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. Wow. One piece of wisdom. Well, I think it's along the lines of what we've been saying. I kind of, got into I had personal issues in my life, and I just heard one version of the one option. Basically, the evangelical conservative Christian option was the only answer to my issues, right? So I would go back and say, no, you can find what's true in yourself, and beware of all these claims of ultimate truth that from particularly religious systems, because 9 times out of 10, there are exceptions, but 9 times out of 10, you'll regret it. So that's probably the main thing. There's a lot of other things too, but
Yes.
like don't worry about what other people think about you. Right. We're always so worried about that. It's like, I wish I could go back with what I know now and go back to college. That would be a blast.
I know. Sometimes I wish that too. And then I'm like, well, I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have all of that. So I
Yeah,
say I
right.
created hell on earth through my addictions to realize that I could
Yeah,
create heaven on earth.
right.
And so
Yeah, but
I have that thought all the time. If I knew now 20 years ago,
right.
like how
But
different.
it's okay to think, yeah, I wish I never went through that too, because you don't have to go through that to learn the lessons. But for someone like you who goes through that, now you can help other people who are going through it, right?
I love that you said that. You don't have to go through that to learn
No.
the lessons. That is where I'm at now. In fact, we've just launched a Follow Your Joy coaching program so that people don't have to suffer in order to learn, that they can learn
Yeah, right. That's
through
good. I
following
like that.
their passions. So yes,
Right.
thank you. Well, Michael, this has been so much fun. I know it took us a while to get here, but we finally did it. So I appreciate you. I appreciate you putting your knowledge out there, writing your books, speaking on platforms to help raise the consciousness and bring more love to the world. So it's been an honor. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's been a pleasure to be with you and an honor as well. You're doing a good work yourself, so keep up a good work.
Thank you. I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.